Good day, listeners. You've tuned in to More Than a Funeral, Voices of the Red River Valley, powered by Korsmo Funeral and Cremation Service right here in Moorhead, Minnesota. My name is Tom, and I'm going to be your host today. And whether you are listening on your computer, maybe your phone, car, any other kind of device, and possibly even your tractor or combine, we welcome you here to today's episode. We all know there are so many funeral-related podcasts of interest dealing with so many various issues, but our focus is going to be on the personal aspect of relationships and the multitude of interesting people and organizations that like to call the Red River Valley their home. And on occasion, we might push the edge a little bit, discuss some of those controversial issues. We all know what we're talking about. Red Jell-O. Is it appropriate to serve at church potlucks anymore, or is it a taboo subject? And there's so many other things such as hot dish, casserole. What's the difference between the two anyway? So, we invite you to sit back for a few minutes, grab yourself a blistering hot cup of Lutheran Church coffee, and enjoy the conversation. We are glad you stopped by to listen. Well, we're sitting here, Paul, on a beautiful October afternoon in South Fargo, and I'm here visiting with Paul Korsmo. And it's an honor and a pleasure for me to sit here with Paul. I've known Paul for over 34 years now, I believe it is. And so worked with Paul for quite some time. And so Paul, of course, has celebrated his 100th birthday. And so we felt this was just a good opportunity to get a little bit of history about the starting of Korsmo and just learn a little bit more about Paul. But I do know some of this information already, Paul, but tell us a little bit. You're born in Northwood. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about your upbringing in Northwood, and I think you come from a farming background, and then maybe you could talk a little bit mention to us about how you decided to go into the funeral business, Paul.
Well, yes, I was born at Northwood, North Dakota on February 26th, 1924, and I was born right on the farm. The doctor came out and delivered me, which was quite common at that time. And I grew up there on the farm at Northwood. We weren't the biggest farmers, but my dad was doing okay. And I went to Sunnyside School, District number 4. School number 4, District number 5.
All right. Did you have to walk very far to school?
I walked about a mile.
Okay. Uphill, of course.
No, it was flat.
Okay. That's right. It is pretty flat up there.
It was about a mile of walking in good weather.
Right.
But in the spring, when the water came through that valley west of the farm, we couldn't cut across the field, so we had to go around by the mailbox, and that added another half a mile to our walk. So, but we lived in it and we made it okay. So I graduated there after 8 years, went to Northwood High School, and enjoyed it very much. I took agriculture as a specialty. In the ag department of the high school, they had an ag department. But I really didn't have a big interest in that ag department because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Except the community cemetery was part of our quarter of land, one of the quarters that we had. And that, for some reason, when every burial was made there, I couldn't wait for those people to get off from there so I could go over and see what happened.
I've been to that cemetery, and it is just within almost a stone's throw of the old homestead,
yes,
isn't it?
From the house.
Right.
And so anyway, but when I was graduated from high school, a senior, I was 4 years, my dad came down with bladder cancer. And he felt he couldn't farm anymore because he was quite ill. And so he asked me, Paul, I'll rent you all my equipment and I'll help you verbally, but I can't farm. Would you like to farm? Well, I really didn't want to farm, but because it was my dad, I said, yes, I'll farm it. But overall, my farming was part of God's plan for my life. You know that? It
I
was
do.
part of God's plan for my life. Because it was during the war years, and the crops were good. It was good weather, and the prices were very good. So I made quite a little money farming 5 years. Then, during that last 5th year, I went to Ebenezer Lutheran Free Church in Northwood. And a girl by the name of Florence Johnson came down. She was teaching in Larimore, North Dakota. And she came down every Sunday night for our evening service. And a relative of mine taught at Kempton, which was halfway between Northwood and Larimore, and would go up and get her from Kempton and take her back Sunday nights. Well, this one Sunday night, Ida came to me and said, the driver of the car, I can't take Florence back tonight. Could you take her back for me?
Ah, I see what's going on here.
And I later found out Florence admitted to me that she concocted that.
Sure.
She wanted me to take her back to Larimore.
Sure.
Well, I took her back. I only had the dirty old pickup in town, and I had a new Chevy car in the garage. But I told her, if you don't mind what you're driving in, why, I'll take you back. So I did. But she must have prayed for this too. I liked it too much. So I figured, I'm going to ask for a date when I drop her off at our house.
So you're driving the pickup or the fancy car?
I'm driving the pickup.
The pickup. So.
Pickup. Dirty old pickup.
Sure.
So I took her back to that. I says, could I take you out to our dinner again here in Larimore some night? Oh, I love that. So I set up a date 2 weeks down the road, not right away.
Didn't want to appear too anxious.
No, I didn't want to feel anxious at all.
There you go.
Because I didn't know. Anyway, I had that date, and I came in my new car this time. And I took her to Grand Forks and went to the best restaurant in Grand Forks. And I thought I'd never forget the name, but I have. And we had a good, I saw to we had an expensive dinner. And then we drove around Grand Forks for quite a while, and I got her back to Larimore by 11 o'clock. And I dropped her at her house, but I had liked that evening too much, so I said, can I come again and take you out to Larimore and out to dinner here in Larimore? Oh, I love that. So I set up a date only a week down the road this time.
There you go.
And we had that date, ate at the Larimore Cafe, and we had a good time, drove around Larimore in the new car. And that went good. Well, it was succeeding dates over the next 2 years.
2 years.
But we didn't do it every week. There was no, because I had to be in the field there in the spring and
you were busy farming.
harvest in the fall. And
Right.
so anyway, she was part of my life. And at the same time, the war was it was during the war, World War II, was toning down, and my brothers, I had 2 brothers in the service. By the way, I was called up and I was a 4F. I injured my arm in a football. I can't straighten it out more than that.
Okay.
When I put my arm up, he said, straighten out your arm. That's all I can do. Put a red mark on my arm. Check out.
Yep.
So I got released.
But you did your part with the farming.
I did my part.
With the farming.
Volunteered
Absolutely.
So anyway,
So
we
you
dated. Even after I got back to the farm, farming it. And
so you were married. Were you married up
we
there?
were married in Northwood. We
Okay.
got married at Ebenezer Lutheran Free Church in Northwood. And I was surprised there, but her mother came from Northwood, and that was her home church. So it was easy for Florence to decide on that. And she was just a member of a small country church out of Osterbrook, North Dakota,
Right.
where the family was living. So anyway, we had the marriage in October 29th. Kind of late, but I had to get the fall work done. And we went for a month-long honeymoon to Duluth.
A month in Duluth?
Well, and Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay.
But we spent most of that time in Duluth because I've always loved Duluth. I've always loved Duluth. Down by the boats, and all of that. But then her mother was living in Minneapolis, so we went there for a whole week. Spent a week with her mother. And everything was going good. Then we came back to the farm and settled down for the winter. I didn't have any cattle. So it was kind of a dreary winter for me. Although I had a plan for the next spring's work and all the next year's crop. And
Sure.
But
So
anyway, she discovered she was pregnant
okay.
with Paulette. That was exposed just a little after a year after our marriage, so we didn't hold back.
So Paulette was born here in North Dakota.
in Northwood Hospital.
Yeah.
Northwood, I was blessed with a hospital.
So at some point then you made the decision, or your history of going to the cemetery, you decided to look at mortuary school. Is that right?
Well, I'm still in the farming situation here.
Right.
But, yes, you're right. Before I even knew Florence, after a burial at the cemetery, I'd have to get over there and see what they were doing. And I never got rid of that urge,
Right.
even after I was farming. But anyway, my brothers came back from the service, both of them about the same time. And they both wanted to farm, so it backed me off. So we were married, and she decided that I should go to mortuary school.
Yeah.
But before I did that, with its daughter already here, and maybe another son later on, I thought, I better be sure that's what I want to do, and it should do.
Right.
So I said, let me get a job in a mortuary and find out. So she said, I want to get a job in the state of Washington, because half of my family is in the state of Washington.
I've often wondered how you ended up in Washington. That's
Because of her family.
okay.
And so I called the Funeral Directors Association down there, and they gave me Steele Funeral Home down in Longview, Washington, was looking for a man. So I called down there, and they were more than glad to talk to me, I'll tell you. I don't know if it was tight employment then or not. But anyway, I went down there to look at it. And I knew right away that I'd love to work there. It was a medium-sized, it wasn't a small firm, it wasn't a real big firm, but it was a medium-sized firm.
Just a good one to get started.
Had three embalmers in it. So, But I ended up doing the embalming before I left there 5 years later.
Right.
I worked there for 5 years, longer than I should have.
Okay.
But it just seemed like Florence was teaching, and her mother was living with us most of the time and taking care of the two little kids and loving it.
So George was born in Longview, right?
George was born in Longview, that's correct.
Yeah. So what?
And I got to tell you this:
Okay.
at George's birth, the doctor said, "Mr. Korsmo, if you would like, stay with your wife throughout the whole birthing time." Well, I would, but I never knew she was going to go through so much pain.
Oh no,
Childbirth is awful.
I wouldn't know, but
Childbirth is awful.
I'll take your word for it.
So that was the last child we had.
Okay, Florence said that's it.
Yeah.
So what was the reason for coming back to North Dakota? Or Minnesota, I should say. Because you settled in Warren, didn't you?
We were still in Warren, in Longview, Washington now.
Right.
So after that spring, we decided, no, that fall, or during the summer, I'm getting a little mixed up, in the summer, we decided I was going to go to mortuary school. So I called on to the University of Minnesota. Oh, she wanted to go to, maybe to take school in Minnesota if I could, because her mother lived in Minneapolis, you know. And I got in by the telephone to Mr. Slater, was the head honcho. And I graduated in 3 years. She was teaching. She got a teaching job on the telephone.
So wherever you were, she was able to get some teaching jobs.
She had two very good degrees.
Okay.
She was well educated. So anyway, after I graduated, I didn't want to go back to Washington. I took an intern job up at the Longview, at the Warren, Minnesota.
Right.
As an intern. But it didn't take me long to see that there wasn't any hope for me there to own. So I quickly started looking around. But I liked working there because the boss was so nice to me.
But just not the opportunity to purchase it, right?
That I knew right away.
Yeah.
He literally told me, you know.
Well, it's good to get that out of the way.
So anyway, a salesman came through one day after I got my license now. Oh, I have to tell you, I skirted all Minnesota laws for a winter in funeral service.
Okay.
Because I was still working as an intern. But he came to me one day. I was the only other worker there. And he said, I've signed a whole bunch of death certificates for you, but Jenny and I are going to Texas for the winter.
For the winter?
Now, then he's going to have an unlicensed funeral director running his place. But because of all the work I had out in Longview, Washington, and Warren, Minnesota, I could handle it, and I did.
Of course.
But we had a train accident, multiple deaths.
Oh no.
Man, who did I get in? I got in another licensed mortician. That's stopping me now.
So that's fine. But so yeah, you jumped in with both feet.
Both feet, I sure did.
So,
but everything turned out well.
So when the salesman came through, you say?
Then the salesman came through and told me about a place for sale in Moorhead, Minnesota.
Okay.
He didn't tell me how bad it looked.
So this was in 1958?
1958.
Yeah.
And we made arrangements to be gone for a weekend and went down and looked at it. Well, it was awful.
Now this
Everything.
This is an old house, kind
It's
of
an old house
on
that
4th.
they put permastone on to kind of build it up a little
Make
bit.
it look good. Was this over on 4th Street?
On 4th Street, 2nd Avenue.
Yep.
It's an apartment. Some kind of a business building now. Apartment.
Oh, that's
It
right.
looks like an apartment house to me, but I don't know what it is.
Sure, but it's still standing.
Yes.
So when you came to Moorhead, just one other funeral home in town,
Right. So
and
yeah.
and so how long were you in the old dumpy building, as you said, before you built your new place?
4 years.
Okay.
4 years. But the first year, I think I had 8 funerals.
Florence again was teaching, right? And so
She got a teaching job right away.
she was keeping the doors open.
And Grandma lived with us, take care of the kids.
Oh man.
And how we all found room up there. No, Grandma did not live with us in that rundown place.
Okay.
No, she didn't. It was after we moved to the new place.
Okay. So you also did service with the ambulance company too, didn't you?
Well, a friend of mine had an auto dealership, used cars, just
Of course.
right next to the funeral home. P.C. Davidson.
Right.
And he came in one day just to talk to me and meet me. And I said, I think I'm going to start an ambulance service to supplement my income. Oh, he says, I'd like to get an ambulance service. Well, I thought, that's funding. I think he's got money. So I said, well, let's do it together. So we started a funeral. He went and bought the ambulance for us. We didn't buy a new one because we didn't know what to do.
Right.
But we got all the more business.
Of course.
We didn't get the Fargo business, but we
Right.
got the more business.
Right. So then you opened the new business in 1962?
Well,
The new
I
building,
got a couple of things I need to tell you before we get in opening the new business.
Sure. I know you have told me in the past that you had a banker that was very instrumental.
Yes.
And
Oh.
he kind of gave you an
I
open...
called the funeral home Korsmo. Kedjo was the guy I bought out.
Okay.
I thought that'd be essential for me to getting some business. So I did. The next day I had an appointment with the forum and went on a quarter-page ad announcing the change of name.
Quarter page.
Yep.
And
So
So that was the switch to Korsmo.
Yep.
But then the new building.
Well, just a minute now. One day after 5 years in that rundown place, but it was getting a little better without that name.
Oh, I bet.
Like you said, Mr. Seberg walked into my office and slammed his fist down on that rundown desk so bad that I thought it was going to fall apart. But it didn't. He said, "How's it going, Mr. Korsmo?" I says, "Not very good." "Paul," he said, "how can you expect people to call you in this dump?"
He called it a dump.
He called it a dump. He literally did. "I know," I said, "Norris, but I don't have the funds. I need to do my part in the building project as yet." He sat up at his desk, very bold like, "I've got the money for you." I said, "Norris, what do you mean when you say you've got the money for?" "I've got the money for you."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I want you to get a contractor, an architect, and a contractor. Come in with a plan and a price on that new building. Oh, and by the way, I just bought some land which would be good for you to own for your funeral home. That's where it is now."
Answer to prayer, as you've said before.
So I got together with who was the guy that I He become my best friend in the church we were going to. Bob Engelstad.
Right.
Engelstad and Foss.
Architect, right?
Yeah. And Kermit Fair, heavy construction. So we got together, the three of us, came up with a plan and a price. $158,000. And that felt like $1 million to me at that time.
Sure.
But I went to saw Norris. Yeah, we can handle that. I says, Norris, what'll my part be? He says, we're not going to worry about it right now. We'll take care of all of the costs for the future. And I'll let you know when we're ready to take money from you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Basically business on a handshake, isn't it?
Yes.
Right.
No, it was an answer to prayer. My wife had been praying so vividly for a new building.
Yep.
But we never thought we'd be able to afford it.
Yep.
But anyway, we built.
And Florence continued to teach.
She was already teaching,
Yep.
teaching every year.
Yeah.
And she was also teaching a Bible class in Moorhead. It was kind of a community Bible class to many churches.
Yep.
She was teaching it.
So you built the business by service clubs, and I know you've talked to some churches and did some outreach, things like that. So now the family, it was interesting to me that George and Paulette and the family all lived in the funeral home, didn't they?
Well, we had to consolidate expenses.
Right.
And we with future plans for that area. And that's south 24 feet.
Right.
It's now lunchroom or whatever you call it.
That's right. But that was your apartment, right?
Yeah, that was our apartment there.
Yeah.
The kitchen up there, in front. Then the fireplace in the living room. It was we had loving living quarters there for quite a while. And it really helped. I could take care of the business at night even, come and eat, and the bell would ring in the kitchen, and I'd run out.
Run out and answer the door. Yeah. So I think I've heard stories that you had to tell the kids to be quiet when you had funerals and visitations.
We had visitation in that one room.
Right.
The back room there,
Yep, no bike riding.
We had to tell the kids to be quiet.
Right.
And they were very oblivious to that.
So I'd
like to say, our kids have never had a spanking.
Okay.
Georgia or Paulette have never had a spanking from their mother or from their father. But their mother was so capable of talking very strongly to them, or firmly, that they understood.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Florence was such a wonderful prayer warrior and such a wonderful mother.
And you've told me before, of course, that she was such an integral part in your business, of course, obviously in your family, but in growing the business. Yeah.
Yes, she sure was.
So you did a lot of everything at the funeral home. You sang for quite a few funerals, didn't you, Paul?
I sang at quite a few funerals too, yes.
Yeah.
And she played. She played the organ.
I did not know that. Okay.
In the summertime only, when she was available,
Right. So at 100 years of age, you've really created a lot of long-standing friendships and relationships, people that we still see and they ask about you. And I know a lot of that has come about from your community involvement. You and I have been to a few church dinners, especially the Lutefisk dinner.
Is that still going on?
Up at Nora Lutheran. No, I think they finally pulled the plug this year. They ran out of volunteers, and just as is the case with many places, they're just running.
I'd love to go to another Lutefisk. Well, I can go to Sons of Norway.
There you go. There you go. So, yeah. So now you retired?
I tell you, I look over my lifetime, and because of Florence being such an integral thing in prayer, and she taught me how to pray.
Mm-hmm.
And our success is just an answer to prayer.
Yes.
It's entirely an answer to prayer. It
So after Florence passed away,
because do you know? I should say that. Did I tell you at first there were three predecessors that owned this? First one was out of Detroit Lakes,
okay,
and then Grinna out of Barnesville and Marotse,
okay.
and then Kedjo.
And so they all tried and didn't make it, but you did.
That's just prayer.
Exactly.
Just prayer.
Yeah. So after you retired, which was probably around when I came, about 1993 or 92, was there a specific retirement date or just about that time?
I didn't have any retirement date in mind. I know that. I got satisfaction out of my work.
You
Very
did.
much so.
I can see that. 'Cause even when I came, you and Florence came around quite frequently, and you helped on funerals. Of course, you didn't do well. You did do a little bit of back
room?
work in the back room, but for the most part, you were the face out in front.
Well, you were working, and who was the other guy?
Well, Greg Krejci.
Greg Krejci.
Absolutely, he was with you a long time. Yeah.
And before him, were you there when the other guy was there?
Was that Milo?
Well, Milo was there for quite a few years.
Okay. Well, you've had a lot of people come through. That's for
And,
sure.
Well, I helped them buy businesses.
Okay.
Because I knew there was no future for him in my business, ownership.
Right.
I wasn't going to. We had a son coming up. I didn't know where he was going to end up.
Right. So now that you've got in, you've been retired and sold the business to George and Ruth, and of course, within the last 4 or 5 years, George and Ruth have sold the business to Sean and Sarah Nygaard. It's in good hands. I'm enjoying working for the two of them, for Sean and Sarah. But are there any reflections over the last 100 years, Paul, just that you'd like to share as we wind this down?
Well, Sean, is an answer to prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Florence, even before Florence died, she was praying for a successor for George, a Christian successor. Oh, here's what I wanted to tell you. Twice here at Pioneer House, old ladies have looked me up and had been to a funeral over at Korsmo's. And they said, we met Sean Nygaard, the funeral director over there. Is he as nice as he seems to be? 2 ladies have done that on me.
Sure.
Is he as nice as he seems to be? I said, he's even better.
No, the business is in good hands, Paul.
I think so.
And like you said, an answer to prayer, too. So
anyway, I'm one of God's most blessed men with what has happened to me.
Mm-hmm. You're living here now in Fargo over at Pioneer House at Elam.
Yeah.
You've been here for 4 or 5 years, maybe?
No, I've been here for 2.5 years.
Okay.
But I was over at Touchmark for at least 3 years.
But I find it interesting that, as you just alluded to, when we have families that come through the funeral home, specifically because of you, they have met you over here. You've been an answer to prayer to these people. And when we meet with them at the arrangements, they tell us specifically that we're here because of Paul Korsmo, because Paul is a good friend, or has made an acquaintance with us too. So you continue in that capacity, and so I agree, and I believe you are also an answer to prayer too, Paul. So you continue that legacy.
Well, because 4 guys couldn't make it, I feel that God has answered our prayers. That's what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I can't take any credit. God has just opened so many doors for us during the years that I was there at the funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
And then George picked it up and he and Ruth done a great job a building on what we had started.
Right.
They built that thing a lot in volume during their tenure there.
Right.
And you have helped it a lot too, Tom. I've heard people refer to you. Not here, but when I've been out, they've said, "Is Tom still there? Is Tom still there?"
Still here.
Still here, but that's good.
You bet. Well, Paul, it's been. I appreciate the opportunity.
Maybe
to
I'm
sit here.
jabbing it too much.
You have been listening to More Than a Funeral, Voices of the Red River Valley. And I have been your host, Tom Pence, and I'm one of the funeral directors at Korsmo Funeral and Cremation Service here in Moorhead, Minnesota. The word service has been an intentional part of our name for over 66 years, and we pride ourselves on attention to detail and personal service. Personally, my responsibilities revolve around the advanced planning aspect of our profession, and I enjoy visiting with people as we discuss the many possibilities of a memorable celebration service that will eventually honor a life according to their wishes. And from a practical standpoint, which is getting so very important these days, I help families plan ahead so that the family left behind will not be burdened with a large financial responsibility, therefore allowing them to spend time with their family, remembering their loved one, not having to worry about how to handle the expenses. Asset protection is also a very real issue these days, as many care facilities can cost several $1,000s a month, depending upon the level of care. Korsmo can provide simple and effective ways of protecting those assets, and I welcome the opportunity to visit with you about that. If you enjoyed this podcast and found some value in it, we greatly appreciate your sharing with a friend, and if you have a moment, text somebody right now. Encourage them to give a listen, and perhaps follow the podcast personally. We anticipate publishing a new episode on the first day of each month, so check back for interesting guests and topics. And of course, we also welcome your suggestions for future guests and topics of interest as well. So thank you for listening, and if you want more information and actually want some free estimates or just have questions, contact any of the directors at Korsmo Funeral and Cremation Service. Our phone number is 218-233-1533, and our web address is korsmofuneralservice.com. Thanks again for listening, and from all of us at Korsmo, have a great day.